Hey everyone, today we are starting our new unit on percents. So the document that I have in this video goes along with the day one percents blank notes that is on our Google Classroom. So you should be looking at those blank notes and following along with this video, as this is a new topic this year. We haven't really discussed percents yet. So the first thing we need to know about a percent is that a percent is a number out of 100. And you guys know this because since you entered Fieldstone, you've been getting graded as a percent. You know the lowest grade you can get is a 0%, and the highest grade you get is a 100%, with the exception of extra credit. So when I give you guys back like a test or a quiz, there are two things that I write on top of your test and quizzes. I write a fraction. For example, let's say I gave you just a quick 10-point quiz, and let's say you got a 9 out of 10 on that 10-point quiz. Next to that fraction, I write what that fraction is as a percentage, which 9 out of 10 is equivalent to a 90%. Now, those are two different numbers. One is a fraction, one is a percent, but they mean the same exact thing. Now, there's another number that I could write on your test, but I don't, that also means the same as a 9 out of 10 and a 90%. And that is this as a decimal, which is, excuse me, a 0.9. Excuse me. So we can write percents as a fraction or as a decimal or as a percent. And that's what we're first going to explore today. Conversions between percents, decimals, and fractions. Now, there are a bunch of different ways you can convert between a fraction, decimal, and a percent. Now, for the sake of the video, I only included one method, but just know that there are other methods that you might have been exposed to, and if you want to use those methods, by all means, go for it. So number one, we first want to change a decimal into a percent. So the quickest way we can change a decimal into a percent is by moving the decimal point 2 spaces to the right. So if I look at letter A, my first decimal is 0.50. So here's my decimal point, and I want to move it 2 spaces to the right. So I'm literally taking that decimal point and I'm moving it once after the 5 and once after the 50, or excuse me, once after the 0, and I put my decimal point there. Now, this number reads 50.0, and that would be a percent, 50%. Now, we don't have to write that 0.0. We can simply just write 50%, and that is 0.5 as a percentage. Okay, so I'm literally just taking wherever that decimal point is and moving it 2 spaces to the right. Okay, for letter B, again, my decimal point comes right before the 7. I'm going to take that decimal point and I'm going to move it once after the 7 and once after the 5. So now it's after the 5. So 0.75 as a percentage is 75%. Now, it's very important to point out that when we are converting anything into a percent, you absolutely must include that percent sign after the number. Because if you don't, then it's just a number. It is not a percent. So we have to make sure that we're drawing that percent sign. Okay, letter C says 0.8. So again, I'm taking that decimal point and I have to move it 2 spaces to the right. So I move it once after the 8. And I still need to move it once again, even though there's not another digit after that 8. Well, it still has to go 2 spaces to the right, so I put a 0 as a placeholder there. So now 0.8 as a percent is 80%. Okay, so when you still move that decimal a space over and there's no digit, just include a 0 as a placeholder. Okay, letter D says 0.09. Again, I'm taking my decimal and moving it 2 spaces to the right. Now that decimal just comes after the 9, so 0.09 as a percent is just 9%. Okay, pause the video and you guys try letters E through H, and I will have the answers up here to check yourself. All right, number 2, now we want to change a percent into a decimal. So we're doing the opposite. So to change a percent to a decimal, we have to move the decimal 2 spaces to the left now. So we're going in the opposite direction. So for letter A, We have 90%. Well, I don't see an actual decimal point next anywhere near that 90%, but remember, it's a whole number. So if it's a whole number, the decimal point is coming after that 0. So it's right after the 0, and now I'm moving that decimal 2 spaces to the left. So 1, 2, put a decimal point. So now 90% as a decimal would be 0.90, or you could absolutely write 0.9, means the same thing. Okay, 32%. Again, I do not see a decimal, but I know that it's coming after the 2, and I'm moving it 2 spaces to the left. So 32% as a decimal is 0.32. 8%, again, the decimal is coming after the 8. I move it once before the 8, and once more, even though there's no digit in front of the 8, I'm going to add a 0 as my placeholder. So 8% as a decimal is 0.08. Again, with 60%, take your decimal, move it 2 spaces to the left. 60% as a decimal is 0.60, or you could write 0.6, means the same thing. Okay, now you guys again try letters E through H, and I will have the answers up here. All right, next set. We now want to change a fraction into a percent. So guys, this is actually how I grade all your tests and quizzes. I write that fraction up top, and then I convert that fraction into a percent. And here's how we do it. We have to, it's really a two-step procedure. We first divide the numerator by the denominator, and then we multiply it by 100. So again, the reason why I say it's a two-step procedure is because step 1 is to divide the fraction, and then step 2 is to multiply that by 100. So for letter A, I have 17/20. So what I would do first is divide my fraction. Now, when you divide your fraction, you got to be very careful that you're doing the numerator divided by the denominator. So you're first doing 17 divided by 20, which you're going to get a decimal, which is equivalent to 0.85. So now I can just convert that fraction to a decimal, but again, I'm converting fractions into a percent, which brings me to step 2. I have to take that decimal and multiply it by 100. And 0.85 times 100 gives us an 85%. Okay, letter B, 18/25. Again, I divide numerator divided by denominator. 18 divided by 25, which gives me 0.72. Take that 0.72 and multiply it by 100, which gives us a 72%. Okay, letter C. We have 9/16. So again, I take 9 divided by 16. And we get 0.5625. Again, a little bit of a longer decimal, but that's fine. Take that decimal now and multiply it by 100. And we should get 56.25. Whoops. 56.25%. Now the question would be, well, do I have to round this? And I mean, if it was a grade, like on a test, I would just round it to a 56%, but we have no context to these numbers. Like, I don't know if this is a grade representing a population or whatever the case may be. So we can just simply leave that as 56.25%. All right, letter D, 3/30. So again, I have to take my numerator and divide it by my denominator. 3 divided by 30 gives me a 0.1 or 0.10. Take that decimal and multiply it by 100, and you will get a 10%. All right, pause the video again and try letters E through F, and I'll have the answers up here. Okay, last section. Now we're going to change a percent into a fraction. So again, to change a percent into a fraction, we do have a two-step procedure. Our first step is to simply take the percentage that we see and write it over 100. Just write it as a regular fraction. And again, the reason why we're writing it over 100 is because a percent is a number out of 100. So for letter A, we have 80%. So we're simply going to take that 80 and I'm going to write it as a fraction over 100. Now I'm dropping that percent sign because it's no longer going to be a percent. And right now it's a fraction. Now that brings us to our second step. And anytime we deal with fractions, we always want to make sure that we simplify or reduce our fractions. So that's what our final step is, to simply take 80 over 100 and simplify it. Now, when I simplify fractions, remember I'm looking for the largest number that's going to divide evenly into both the numerator and the denominator, which in this case would be 20. So I would divide both my numerator and my denominator by 20. And when I do that, we would get 4/5. So 80% as a simplified fraction is equivalent to 4/5. Okay, letter B is 42%. So again, I take that 42, I drop the percent sign, and I write it over 100. Again, that fraction is not simplified, so I need to simplify it. And the largest number that divides evenly into both 42 and 100 is 2. So I divide both my numerator and my denominator by 2. And when I do that, I end up with the simplified fraction of 21 over 50. So 42% as a fraction is 21 over 50. Letter C, 5%. Again, write 5 over 100 and simplify. 5 is the number that divides evenly into both 5 and 100. So I would end up with a 1/20. And 70, I would write 70 over 100, and the number that divides evenly into both 70 and 100 is 10. So I would end up with 7/10. All right. Again, pause the video and try letters E through H, and I will have the simplified fractions up here. All right. Okay, now what we're going to look at, now that we just did some conversions, is actually counting percents of numbers. And this is very important. Now, how we calculate percents of numbers? Well, if we just look at number one says, what is 10% of 100? Well, there's actually a key word in that question that kind of tells us exactly what we have to do. And that key word is of. Now, others are one of those keywords in math that tell us a specific operation that we have to do. And the word of means multiplication. So I have to find 10% of 100. So since that word of comes in between 10% and 100, and of means multiplication, I'm simply multiplying 10% by 100. Now, I need to do something with that 10% before I multiply it. Now, there are two things you can do. You first would have to convert that percent into either a decimal or to a fraction. Now, I think it's easier to convert the percent into a decimal and then multiply, so that's what I'm going to do. So 10% as a decimal is equal to 0.10 or 0.1. So I'm going to take that 0.10 and I'm going to multiply it by 100. Whatever I get as an answer is, in fact, 10% of 100. So 0.10 times 100 is 10. So 10% of 100 is equal to 10. Now, it's not equal to 10%. It's just equal to 10. Okay, so that's how we find percents of numbers. We simply take the percent and we multiply it by the number. Now, again, you just got to remember, you got to convert that percent into either a fraction or a decimal, but I typically always just convert the percent into a decimal because I think it's simpler. Okay, so if we look at letter A says, what is 20% of 100? Again, I see that key word of means multiplication. So I'm multiplying 20% and 100. I'm first going to turn my 20% into a decimal, which is 0.20, and then I'm multiplying it by 100. And 0.20 times 100 gives me 20. So 20% of 100 is 20. Letter B now, 30% of 100. We have a 0.30 times 100, which is going to give us 30. All right, letter C, 40% of 100. Well, 40% as a decimal is 0.40 times 100 gives us 40. So 40% of 100 is equal to 40. And letter D, 50% of 100, 0.50 times 100 gives us 50. Okay, so to find, the percent of a number, guys, all we have to do is multiply the percent times the number. Again, just remember to convert that percent into a decimal before you multiply. Okay, number 2 now says, what is 10% of 200? Well, again, I see that word of, so I got to multiply. I got to take my percent and convert it into a decimal. So 10% as a decimal is 0.10. 0.10 times 200 gives us 20. So 10% of 200 is 20. Letter A, 20% of 200. Well, 0.20 times 200 gives us 40. Letter B, 30% of 200. 30% as a decimal is 0.30 times 200, which is 60. And letter C, 40% as a decimal is 0.40 times 200, which is equal to 80. And last but not least, 50% of 200. Well, 50% as a decimal is 0.5 times 200 equals 100. Now, you might be noticing a pattern, and that pattern is going to help you guys compute these percent of numbers mentally in your head without actually having to do the computations off to the side, which is absolutely fine. Okay, number 3 says, what's 10% of 300? So again, 10% as a decimal, 0.10 times 300, which is equal to 30. So 10% of 300 is 30. 20% of 300, well, 20% is equivalent to 0.20. And again, I simply just take that percent and I move the decimal 2 spaces to the left to convert the percent into a decimal. So 20% of 300 is 60. 30% of 300 is 90. 40% of 300 is 120. And last but not least, 50% of 300 is equal to 150. Okay, I want you guys to take some time and try page 5 on your own, number 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I will have the answers up here that you can refer to when you're done. All right, hopefully you guys got those correct. And you could have done the work off to the side, but if you guys noticed the pattern already, then you could have just did it mentally in your head. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so to quickly review, again, to find the percent of a number, you can use either of the following methods. You write the percent as either a fraction or a decimal, and then simply just multiply that fraction or decimal by the number you're finding the percent of. Okay, now with these percents, there are a bunch of different type of word problem questions that you guys are going to be responsible for answering. Now, there are a bunch of keywords and phrases that we are going to have to recognize that mean that we have a percent problem. And the first key word is commission. Now, commission is something that occurs in the real world, and it is represented by a percentage. So in the box here, it says a commission is the amount of money that a salesperson earns on a sale. And a percent is used to show the rate of commission. So for example, if someone works at Foot Locker, or if you guys have ever gone into Foot Locker and you pick out a pair of sneakers from the wall, you're not able to just go in the back, in that magical back room, and get the sneakers yourself. You have to go up to someone who works there, and they have to go back and into that back room and get the sneakers for you. The person that is helping you out is making a commission. So the amount of money they sell, they earn a percentage of that. And that's how they make their money. So as another example, it says Vanessa is a salesperson at a jewelry store. She earns 8% commission on each sale. Well, how much does she earn on the sale of a $2,400 diamond ring? So she's selling a $2,400 diamond ring. She's not making that amount of money. She's only making 8% of that. So if I wanted to figure out how much money she was making in commission, I would have to determine, well, what is 8% of 2,400, because that's the amount of money that she's making. So I would have to take that 8% and convert it into a decimal, and 8% as a decimal is 0.08. Careful, it is not 0.8. And then again, since I'm finding the percent of a number, that word of means multiplication. I simply have to multiply those two numbers, and we would get 192. So that would tell us that Vanessa makes $192 by selling that $2,400 diamond ring. Okay, so that's what we're going to explore now, is commission word problems. We're going to find out, well, how much money are people making in commission? And again, commission is represented as a percent. Okay, so number one says Martin is paid a 12% commission on his shoe sales. He sold $780 worth of shoes. Find his commission. Okay, so he sold $780. That does not mean that he's making $780. He is only making 12% of that. Okay, so what we have to do for these problems is we have to find, again, the percent of a number. In this case, we have to figure out what is 12% of 780. Well, there's that word of. Again, of means multiplication. So I'm simply multiplying 12% and 780. Before I multiply those two numbers together, I have to convert that 12% into either a fraction or a decimal. As I said, I always convert the percents into a decimal. So 12% as a decimal is 0.12, and then I'm multiplying that by 780. And 0.12 times 780. If you guys just plug that into your calculator is going to give you 93.6. But remember, we are dealing with money. When we deal with money, you need to have two digits after the decimal point. Your calculator does not know that we're talking about money, so they leave off that digit on the end. And the digit they leave off is 0. So you guys got to make sure that you remember to include the 0 at the end. Okay, so our answer is choice C. Martin makes $93.60. Okay, number 2, Andrea is paid a 18% commission on her cosmetic sales. She sold $550 worth of cosmetics. Find her commission. Okay, so again, she's not making $550. She's only making 18% of that. So I have to figure out what is 18% of 550. Okay, so again, there's that word of. I got to multiply, but before I do that, I need to convert 18% into a decimal, and 18% as a decimal is 0.18, and then I simply multiply that by 550. When you do that, you should get $99. Okay, number 3, Thomas earns a 5% commission for each cellular phone he sells. On Tuesday, he sells a cellular phone for $180. How much commission does Thomas earn on this sale? Well, again, I got to figure out, if he's only making 5% of that, what is 5% of 180? I got to convert 5% into a decimal. Now be careful, 5% as a decimal is equal to 0.05, not 0.5. 0.5 is 50%. And then I simply multiply those two numbers together and we should get $9. So Thomas is earning $9 on commission. Okay, I want you guys now to go to the next page and try numbers 4 through 8, and I will simply just have the answers up here so you can check your work. So pause the video and try those 5 questions on your own. All right. If we now look at the next page, and I know I skipped a couple of numbers, but this one is number 11. These are also commission problems, but it just requires a couple of extra steps than the previous questions. So number 11 says, use the following information to answer the question that follows. Okay, so I have 2 bullet points, and those bullet points I need to use in order to answer this question completely. So it says, Tom earns $500 per week. He is paid an 8% commission. This week, he sold $7,994 worth of goods. How much did Tom earn this week? Okay, so Tom is making money 2 different ways. He's, no matter what, he goes to work, he makes $500. On top of that, he's making an 8% commission. So I got to find out how much Tom has made in total. So I'm first going to determine, well, how much is he just earning in commission? And I know that he's earning 8% of $7,994. So I got to figure out, well, what is 8% of that amount? So I first got to take 8% and convert it into a decimal. And 8% as a decimal is 0.08. And I simply times that by 7,994. When I do that, I get $639.52. So he's making $639.52 just on commission. But again, just for showing up to work that week, he is also earning $500. So in order to find out how much he's making in total, I simply got to take his weekly salary, which is $500, and add how much he made in commission. So I have to add $639.52 plus $500. When I add that up, we should get $1,139.52. So that's how much Tom is earning in total. All right, number 12, same type of situation. We're going to use both these bullet points to determine how much Beth is earning this week. So she earns a weekly salary of $215, but on top of that, she is paid a 7% commission, and this week she sold $2,200 worth of goods. Well, let's first determine how much she made in commission. So I know she's making 7% of $2,200. So 7% as a decimal is 0.7, and I'm timesing that or multiplying that by 2,200. When I do that, we should get $154. So she's just making $154 in her commission. But again, just for showing up to work that week, she's making an additional $215. So in order to figure out how much she's making in total, I have to take her weekly salary and add how much she made in commission. When I do that, we should get $369. So she's made a total of $369 that week. Okay, guys, pause the video and try to complete number 13 on your own. Again, using both those bullet points to determine how much Warren is earning this month. Okay, for number 13, you should have gotten that Warren earned a total of $8,000 this month. Okay, guys, now what you're going to do is you're going to complete the Google form that's on our Google Classroom. The Google form includes some conversions, so converting between fractions, decimals, and percents, finding just basic percent of a number, and then just a couple of commission word problems. Okay, guys, if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to ask. I know this is a brand new